The Knights of St. Catherine, The Return Home, continuation of Chapter 5. After a few dances and laughing, Henry led Nova outside to get some fresh air. Did you see? Nova started. I know, Henry replied, ending on a laugh about the fellow dancers. They fell into a comfortable silence until Nova started shivering. So Henry drew her to him and wrapped them both in his jacket. You are so warm, Nova hummed, gripping Henry's waist tighter, snuggling in closer. Henry stood stock still for a heartbeat before taking a deep breath and tilted Nova's chin up so he could see her face. You are beautiful, Henry commented as he leaned down and nuzzled his nose between Nova's neck and shoulder. And you smell even more amazing, Henry continued, before running his nose up Nova's neck and brushing his lips over Nova's. Nova was a little taken aback by the kiss at first, but when Henry pulled back to look into her eyes, she threaded her fingers into Henry's hair and gently tugged his head to her right-hand side, and on her tiptoes placed a kiss on his collarbone, which made Henry growl involuntarily, and White streaked to bare his teeth and growled to Henry, Mark her as ours, now. Not yet, Henry panted in return. You don't know her yet, Henry continued. But you can sense we are both drawn to her, Whitestreak howled. As Nova's kisses had reached Henry's earlobe, Henry sharply turned his head and kissed Nova unexpectedly, and began running his hands down her sides and grabbing her butt, muttering, I wish you had a skirt on, which Nova moaned in reply to, and began touching Henry's bare skin between his shirt and jeans. Henry's hand shot out to stop Nova's ministrations of his skin and began to concentrate on the sounds around him and Nova, almost shaking his head from side to side. I'm so, Nova began before Henry spun her around and trapped Nova between the wall of the pub and himself. He kissed her on the nose, just as he let out a low growl, which Nova could easily sense as a warning. Before Nova could realize what was happening, a dark-colored van pulled up, and four similarly dressed people grabbed Henry and dragged him into the van before speeding off. No! Nova screamed at the top of her lungs as she watched the van disappear, just as the Knights and Nate came tumbling out of the pub's front door. Shit. We need to get back to the pack house and talk to Ellie. Nova, you need to come too, James stated. Chapter 6, The Grand Plan. Why should we go with you? Nova questioned. Nate, we need to go straight to Linden with this, Nova cried while stamping her foot on the ground. Tell me, Nova, who do you think would do this and take Henry? Nate calmly replied before continuing. Our only allies at the moment are Henry's family. Let's go see his mum, yeah? It did not take long for the motley group to arrive back at the pack house. What is that disgusting smell? James stated, gagging on thin air. David and Ethan had also noticed the smell and formed a protective circle around Nova and Nate. I don't smell anything. Do you? Nova whispered to Nate, who only shook his head in reply. As they got closer to the house, David spotted Gemma on the porch reading a very thick book. Gemma, lass, what you doing out here in the chill? Gemma looked up from the book to the group and simply replied with, I was not going to stay in the house with that smell and the sounds of Ellie and Hamish fucking. The three boys looked at each other before yelling, I'm going to do a perimeter sweep, with Ethan the first to run off and transform before the others could complain. James sighed and turned to Nova and Nate, stating, Hamish is Henry's father and the alpha of the Knights of St. Christopher in the United States. Nova blanched at the thought of meeting the two alphas who sired Henry, since she only met the man a few hours ago. Nate was more relaxed with his information and diplomatic in his reply. That is excellent news to have both here. Well, boys, I guess you want me to break up the welcome back party of our alphas, Gemma queried. Ah, if you don't mind, lass. Tundra and Arctic are less likely to maim you in the process, David replied. Gemma sighed, snapping her book shut. Fine. Then please take our guests into the sitting room and break out the good whiskey. I think the young lady there might need some liquid courage to meet her potential boyfriend's parents, Gemma ordered, while heading inside. Nova and Nate sat patiently on the sofa with a couple of drinks when they heard an awfully loud growl, followed by the sound of shattering glass and Gemma's sudden reappearance in the sitting room doorway. They'll be done in a few minutes, Gemma informed the group before reaching for her own drink. In flagrante? James asked over the rim of his own glass. Yes, and the good Waterford crystal vase was sacrificed, Gemma replied with a frown, since it was her favourite. 10 minutes later, Ellie was followed into the sitting room by Hamish, who was buttoning up his vest while trying to kiss Ellie's neck. Before introductions can be made, where is Ethan and my son? Ellie asked. Ethan is doing a perimeter check, James replied, as Ellie nodded and headed over to the window, leaning out and yelling, "Coward!" at the top of her lungs. Right. And where is my son? Ellie continued while closing the window. Now, Lassie, this is why we have brought Nova Richardson and Nate Sullivan back. It seems as if the daughters of Apollo have kidnapped Henry, David softly explained, while motioning to the two people on the couch. Okay, Mr. Sullivan. I smell more magic on you than on Miss Richardson, so talk, Ellie stated, while sitting down in one of the armchairs. With that introduction, Nate explained about the vision that Phenomi had and how, over the centuries, many oracles have tried to decipher its meaning. Another damn prophecy, Ellie muttered, shaking her head, while noticing Hamish had begun to pace in the doorway. I'm sorry, another one? Nate queried, and Ellie then filled Nova and Nate in on the prophecy that surrounded Henry's being conceived and born. After hearing the story, Nate certainly was more relaxed about how Henry came around to being on Earth. Anyway, I think that two people in the original vision are Nova and Henry, as I have been dreaming about Nova lately, and a man with dirty blonde hair and a lovely smile, Nate finished, smiling at Nova, who looked at him with her mouth open, stunned at the whole situation. That is all well and good, but where is my son? Hamish roared from the doorway, with his eyes flashing yellow. Ellie jumped up and placed herself between Hamish and their guests. They will help us find him, my mate. We will find our pup and bring him home, Ellie soothed. Hamish, you need to calm down, Ellie continued, while stroking his face. Shh, Ellie whispered, placing a kiss on the juncture of Hamish's neck and shoulder, which made Hamish look at Ellie and nod at their son's potential mate. Gemma, can you and the others take over forming a plan? Arctic and I are going to take Hamish and Tundra out for a run. Ellie paused. And more, I hope, as Tundra Hamish growled out. Yes, my love. I'll send Ethan in when I see him. Let's go. Ellie commanded as she took Tundra Hamish's hand and headed outside. As the others sat and waited for Ethan to return, they spoke about how they became knights and daughters and what they could potentially do. Finally, Ethan walked into the house. Right, our fearless leader is with her bait. Anyone come up with anything useful? Ethan asked. Possibly, James began. Nova was telling us that she was drawn to Henry even before we shoved him over to her table. So we thought that if Nate can cast a spell on Nova to amplify those feelings, Nova might be able to lead us straight to Henry, James finished. That sounds great. How do we get into a building in the first place? Ethan queried. No one's going to like how we do this, but I think we're going to have to be bait. Is the only way we'll be allowed in without fighting straight off the mark, James finished. What? You mean like Chewbacca in Star Wars? Ethan cried. Yes, laddie, David replied. Ugh. Fine. When? Ethan asked. As soon as Ellie and Hamish come back, I'm afraid, Nate replied. Chapter 7. The Rescue. Why are you here? one of the guards yelled at Henry as another backhanded him across the face, causing his split lip to bleed more. How did you come to be? Another screamed from across the room, while tossing what, to Henry, looked like a bright, glowing ball of blue, which hit him in the middle of his chest, causing him to almost double over to catch his breath, which was extremely hard since he was tied up to a chair with a rope around his chest. Why doesn't he transform into his wolf? Does he want to die? Were a couple of the whispers that were going on around Linden as she carefully watched the interrogation through the one-way mirror. I don't care about his reasons or the forces that were behind his creation. I want him and the others wolves dead, Linden announced, stalking away to her office, leaving her staff to look at each other with horrified looks on their faces. We can't do that, one brave soul spoke up. The White Magus would come after all of us, another agreed. The third suggested. Let's give this a break, motioning to the room behind the glass. If anyone comes to rescue him, we will just stay out of the way, but only tell this to the ones you can trust. The ones that follow Linden can lay down their lives for her. With that, the three went off in different directions to spread the word. So you are telling me that the Daughters of Apollo are underneath the Natural History Museum? Ethan asked. What? No different to the White Rose Temple being under All Saints Langham Place, or the White Magus residing in Kensington Palace, Nate countered. Good point, Ethan nodded. But something is different. Something has happened. Nate trailed off, flicking his fingers in the air with his eyes closed. Nova, can you feel that? Nate queried after a while. Kinda. It feels as if the daughters have shifted into two different halves, Nova responded. Yeah, one half is giving out a really strong, non-threatening vibe, and the other, well, they just want to kill all wolves, Nate finished. Well, at least that is something. We only have half the daughters against us now. I wonder if the others will help us get through to find Henry. Ellie stated from the back of the group. You won't be doing it alone, a voice piped up from behind Ellie. The man bowed to Ellie while handing her a wax-sealed envelope. Do I need to open this, or can you just tell me the contents? Ellie asked. My name is Jackson Park, and the White Magus sent us, Jackson finished, gesturing to the dozen White Rose members behind him. Say no more. Thank the Magnus for me when this is over, Ellie stated, while Jackson nodded at her. Okay, let's go. Nova, lead the way, Ellie commanded, as the wolves began to disrobe and shift. As expected, there were not as many daughters for the group to dispatch until they got closer to the interrogation room. Jackson had sent half of his group to go and find Linden, while he helped with finding Henry. He should be in the room just ahead, Nova stated, feeling tense and almost itchy with an overwhelming urge to see Henry and kiss him breathless. Just before Nova reached the door, Nate yanked her out of the way as Linden had turned the corner. I knew you two would be on the wolf's side of things, Linden screeched. They will not kill us, Linden. The vision has said all along that we need to join with them, Nate said softly. No! Linden cried out, while hurling a glowing ball of energy towards the group. It was then that a few things happened at once, and to Hamish's mind, it all happened in slow motion. Ellie had pushed her way to the front of the group and got hit with the energy ball that in turn flung her over their heads and into a wall a few meters behind them. Nova and Nate, followed by David, lunged forward towards the door handle, but they managed to get into the room without a problem. Jackson and his White Rose group threw their own spells at Linden, knocking her to the ground, and tied her up promptly. And it was only the sound that Hamish could hear was the gut-wrenching sound of Tundra howling in pain as he stalked over to Arctic's not-moving form. By the time he'd gotten to Arctic's side, the wolf had shimmered back into Ellie's form. Tundra had tried to pick Ellie up in his massive paws, but whimpered with how small she felt, and let Hamish take over, who was screaming at Ellie to wake up while crying, Ugh, not so loud, Hamish. You'll wake the baby, Ellie muttered before going limp again, which stunned Hamish no end. Here, I think Ellie will be fine, James stated, holding out both of their robes.